Coming up next, for decades, today's featured duo has walked the line between obscurity and popularity, between camouflage and captivating the masses. Originating in LA's Paisley Underground scene in the 80s. Within a decade, they were all over radio, thanks to an iconic sleeper hit. One of the biggest sleeper hits ever. Today's accidental anthem, it was never meant to be anything special. In fact, this group had no aspirations for commercial success at all. For them, it was all about the inner world of their music. They could care less if anyone else liked it or even heard it. But the problem was, a lot of people did hear it and they did love it. So to shed the spotlight, they intentionally vanished. They called it quits and they faded into the background. But even without any promotion on their part, this Bottle Lightning track, today's song, refused to die. It refuses to die. And over the decades, it's become a pop culture mainstay, to the point where it may be one of the most overused songs in film and television. See if you agree with me next on Professor of Rock. Hey music junkies, Professor of Rock, always here to celebrate the greatest artists and the greatest songs of all time. You know, if you remember scratch and sniff stickers back in the 80s, you're going to dig this channel of deep musical nostalgia. Remember I had a classmate who actually ate them. Make sure to subscribe below right now. Click the big red button, click the bell so you always know when our stuff comes out. We also have a Patreon and we have our merch below that helps us to keep it a daily channel so that we can continue to do interviews and such. So it's time for another edition of our series, Bottled Lightning. This is where we celebrate a song or an album that was king for a day or for many days. Here we honor artists and bands that rocketed up the charts, but for reasons sometimes unknown, they just weren't able to sustain that success. A lot of people call them one-hit wonders. We try to celebrate them instead as lightning in a bottle. Man, today we have a really great show. On this episode, we're going to feature the California duo Mazzy Star and their haunting, truly haunting hit, Fade Into You. Now, consisting of multi-instrumentalist David Roback and a hypnotic songstress, Hope Sandoval, the roots of Mazzy Star stretch back to the early 80s in the LA music scene. From 81 to 84, David Roback, he played with his brother Steven in the band Rain Parade, which was one of the defining acts of the Paisley Underground, a post-punk neo-psychedelic movement that included acts like Dream Syndicate, 3 O'Clock, and, of course, the Bangles. The days of wine and roses. The Roback brothers, they were former punks. They loved the Byrds as much as they loved the Sex Pistols. Setting gloomy lyrics to bright jangle pop guitars, the Rain Parade released their debut album, Emergency Third Rail Power Trip, in 1983. However, for David, Rain Parade soon became what he said was a drag. He left to form the band Clay Allison with former Dream Syndicate member and girlfriend Kendra Smith. Now later, they changed their name to Opal. The band released their solitary studio album, Happy Nightmare Baby. That was in 1987. Gonna be my baby. Meanwhile, there was Mexican-American Hope Sandoval, who grew up in Los Angeles and had a band of her own. It was a folk outfit called Going Home with guitarist Sylvia Gomez. Fans of Dream Syndicate, Hope and Sylvia gave Kendra Smith a demo tape. This led to a recording session with David Roback in the producer's chair. Now, the album went unreleased, but Going Home continued to play gigs in California throughout the mid-'80s, and they stayed close to Kendra and to David. So then in December 1987, while Opal was touring with Jesus and Mary Chain in England, Kendra Smith stormed off stage during a show and just completely vanished. In her absence, Hope was recruited by David Roback to be Kendra's replacement. For a while, the pair continued playing under the name Opal, but ultimately they changed their name to what we all know as Mazzy Star. Mazzy Star's debut LP, 1990's She Hangs Brightly, that introduced the world to Hope Sandoval's ghostly, dream pop vocals, just dripping with sincerity. Sandoval replaced Opal's more psychedelic vibe with a haunting, ethereal, slowcore sound. Just dark and truly dreamy. She Hangs Brightly was a mesmerizing affair. Released on Rough Trade in the UK, the record captured attention of Capitol Records in the US, and they ultimately signed Mazzy Star. But of course it would be Mazzy Star's 1993 follow-up, So Tonight That I Might See, that would really take them to the masses. Of course, on the strength of their most iconic single, Fade Into You. The opening track of So Tonight That I Might See, Fade Into You, is a hypnotic ballad built on acoustic guitar and tambourine. Now, typically, Hope writes most all the lyrics for Mazzy Star's music on her own. Reportedly, she even eavesdrops in public places for song ideas, hearing people talk. Describing their songwriting process, David called it very abstract, not really real. We just make music. We would do it at home if nobody cared. And for Fade Into You, they wrote it in a single day. Recounting how it came about, he said, the music and the lyrics came almost at the very same time. We weren't trying to write a hit song. We were just trying to write a song. I think we had a melody and a feel, and we just followed that feel. And that became the song. It was acoustic guitar and both of us singing. And after we'd written the song, then we arranged it for other instruments, piano and slide guitar and drums. It's true. Equal parts bleak and beautiful, Fade Into You boasts an iconic opening verse. I want to hold the hand inside you. I want to take the breath that's true. I want to take the breath that's true. I look to you and I see nothing. I look to you and see the truth. I mean, it's pure pitch black poetry. I look to you and I see nothing. Yearning and despairing. But don't call it nostalgic. That's because in Roback's own words, Fade Into You was never intended to be a nostalgic song. Unless you were meant to think about nostalgia for the present, because it really was about the present, his quote. So there you go. One of the few explanations from this band about this song. Not much out there about it. Emerging from the shadows, Fade Into You reached number 44 on the Billboard Hot 100. Went to number 33 on the Cashbox chart, number 19 on the U.S. mainstream rock chart, and went to number 3 on the U.S. alternative chart. Internationally, Fade Into You had less success. Went to number 83 in Canada, number 72 in Australia, and number 48 in the UK. Although in Iceland, it did go to number 3. Way to go, Iceland. Afterwards, Capitol then issued a single version of Hala from their former record, She Hangs Brightly. Interest in the two singles ultimately slowly pushed Mazzy Star for their first album, She Hangs Brightly, to gold status, and then their second, So That Tonight I Might See, that went platinum. This exposure thrust Mazzy Star into the spotlight. It's a place they never wanted to be. With audiences suddenly filling up venues to hear Fade Into You live, Mazzy Star found things getting more and more uncomfortable. As it turns out, Fade Into You was the hit that Mazzy Star never wanted. I look to you to see the truth. Hope, in particular, she's very shy, very private person, and she found the prospect of performing on stage in front of so many people undesirable, as she would say. She'd even go as far as saying, for me, recording is better. Live, I just get really nervous. Once you're on stage, you're expected to perform, and I don't do that. I always feel awkward about just standing there and not speaking to the audience. It's difficult for me, end of quote. David Roback, for his part, he had similar misgivings about commercial success. He said, and I quote, we're not so concerned about the outside world. It's a very internal process that we're involved in. The outside world is really not on our minds. Insofar as the music is concerned, it's really its own world unto itself. Now, for the duo of Mazzy Star, making the music was the priority, and they wanted no part of the trappings that came with fame. Fame and money, it didn't interest them. Fame, Roback said succinctly, can screw up people's heads. So soon as Mazzy Star started becoming popular, the reclusive duo, they pulled back on the reins really hard. But by then, it was just too late. Fade Into You had become a hit. There was nothing they could do to put the genie back in the bottle. And making matters worse, not long after, Hope Sandoval would score another top 5 alternative hit. It's when she collaborated with Jesus and Mary Chain on their 1994 album Stoned and Dethroned. Her duet with Jim Reed, Sometimes Always, climbed to number 4. Sandoval was definitely making a name for herself, even if she didn't want to. With fans clamoring for more Mazzy Star, more from them, Roback and Sandoval returned in 1996 with their third studio album, Among My Swan. The aim of that record, according to Hope, was to please themselves and nobody else. And after its release, the duo refused to participate in any meaningful marketing strategy. As a result, Among My Swan didn't produce a follow-up hit to Fade Into You. The singles Flowers and December, that went to number 40 in the UK, but it was MIA on the Hot 100 here in America. Additionally, an outtake from the album, Tell Me Now, appeared on the Batman Forever soundtrack in '95. Tell me now that there. An album cut called Rhymes of an Hour also featured on the soundtrack for Stealing Beauty, but even that felt like too much exposure for this reclusive band. Mazzy Star did their due diligence, embarking on a 5-month tour across the U.S. and Europe. After that, Roback and Sandoval got back and they got to work on a 4th album. However, by this point, the music industry machine was bearing down on them. Capitol, they were taking a more aggressive approach with this duo. Hope Sandoval would say that up to that point, they'd been allowed to be creative. Go at their own pace, do their own thing. But that changed when major labels started wanting bands that would sell 7 million records. They had a formula, and suddenly all these people wanted to come to the studio to keep track of what we were doing and make sure that we were following that exact formula. So we just got out. I think it's strange. Mazzy Star dissolved in 1997, and Hope Sandoval turned her attention to some under-the-radar collaborations. A few years later, in the summer of 2000, Mazzy Star did briefly reunite for a brief tour. And this is where they performed material that they had written for their 4th album, giving fans hope that a new record would be somewhere along the horizon. The two former bandmates were in no hurry. In the meantime, Sandoval joined with the drummer from My Bloody Valentine to form Hope Sandoval and the Warm Inventions. This led to 3 albums between 2001 and 2016. Now, throughout this period, Hope verified that Mazzy Star still existed. She said, and I quote, "We've always had, big gaps between records. Generally, we just play music when we feel like it." Well, true to her word, Hope did reunite with David to release their belated 4th album in 2013. This ended a 17-year drought between studio albums. Titled Seasons of Your Day, the record featured multiple singles, which in true Mazzy Star fashion, failed to chart. The seasons of your day. Since then, the pair have released an EP called Still. That one dropped in 2018. Fortunately, that would be their last release, as sadly David Roback would die of cancer on February 24, 2020. So there is another fascinating aspect to Mazzy Star that I did want to explore before we go. Has to do with pop culture's obsession with using Fade Into You in movies and TV shows. Now, for a band who barely showed up as a blip on the mainstream radar, it turns out that Fade Into You is one of the most popular soundtrack selections around. Maybe that's because it's the perfect song for setting a darkly intimate mood. Dimly lit dances, and moody moments of teenage angst seem to be par for the course for this one. Almost from its inception, Fade Into You has appeared in so many movies and TV shows. It showed up in Angus in 1995, probably the most memorable use. Dari in Starship Troopers in 97, Gilmore Girls in 2000, Roswell in 2001, Desperate Housewives in 2004, Alias and Cold Case in 2005, CSI, Fringe, Psych, True Blood. That's just a starting sample. In fact, by 2013, many critics, including Vulture, were calling Fade Into You the most overused song in film and television. Well, it hasn't slowed down any since then.
Not with an officer. No, sir. Damn, I doesn't mean stupid troopers.
I mean, Fade Into You recently has scored placements in AP Bio, Tall Girl, Riverdale, Cruel Summer, Dope Sick, Virgin River, Yellow Jackets, The Crown, and Three Body Problem.
Susan.
Just doing a quick survey online, Fade Into You has at least 50 placements in television and film, which compared to most songs we cover, that's a lot. Even despite its pop culture popularity, though, Mazzy Star has still managed to stay more or less obscure. So case in point, contrast that with the recent resurgence of Kate Bush's Running Up That Hill, A Deal with God. I mean, like Mazzy Star, Kate Bush was never a mainstream act here in the US. I mean, in the UK, it's a different story. But on the Hot 100, she only broke the top 40 once when Running Up That Hill reached number 30 in 1985. That is until the song had a massive comeback in 2022 when it was used in season 5 of Stranger Things. That sent it to number 3 on the Billboard Hot 100 so many years later. So it's interesting, while Running Up That Hill found renewed popularity after being featured in a single series, albeit one of the biggest series out there, Fade Into You has continued to stay kind of on the down low despite several high-profile media appearances. It's funny how that works. For proof, you can see it on YouTube and Spotify. You know, Running Up That Hill has just blown up in a couple of years, while Fade Into You has grown at a more conservative rate, but still on the horizon. I'm not saying one track or the other is better or more deserving. I just find it interesting that Mazzy Star, who never wanted the spotlight, has been able to stay semi-obscure despite such a giant pop culture footprint. What do you think? Do you like having Mazzy Star hidden in the background? To end on, neither Sandoval or Roback have given many interviews at all. There's a couple. In fact, when asked about the song back in the day, all Hope would say was, I think it's a good song. I think it's a good song. As I mentioned before, with the sad passing of David Roback, Mazzy Star won't ever release another album. They'll never tour again. But they gave us a true standard. A song of the times that's authentic beauty is truly unparalleled. I mean, nobody sings like Hope Sandoval. And I can't think of a song quite like Fade Into You since it came out. It's truly a revelation. A song that takes you to another dimension with its mesmerizing grace. I mean, it can fall under so many categories here on just our channel. Number 1 in our hearts, the new standards, breakthrough. But I think Bottle of Lightning is most appropriate because it was a bright, shining star that burned so bright. Nothing the band could ever do after that would equal it. It's just too perfect. Thanks so much for watching. Leave us a comment about Mazzy Star and Fade Into You. What are your memories of the song? What do you think about their approach afterwards? Have you heard this song? What do you think about its use in pop culture? What are some other songs like that burn so bright that they just faded away? Let's have a great discussion below. If you like our content, we do invite you to subscribe. We'd love to have you as part of our community. Until next time, 3 chords and the truth, my friends.